Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
Yes. Hi, Hubert. Thank you for the invitation to this call and to be part of the very, I think, fundamental discussion you're having within your network on how to respond to this crisis. I work for the healthcare sector in the Netherlands. We invest about 230 billion on behalf of about 3 million people in the Netherlands for their pensions, mainly people working in the health and care sector. And we invest that money globally. Actually, as we look at this COVID crisis, we think that it's going to bring very fundamental change. So first of all, when we look at the US and Europe, we expect there's not going to be a quick recovery. So maybe the markets are really being quite optimistic about the ability of governments to respond to this through monetary and fiscal stimulation. Of course, governments in Europe and the US are pouring huge amounts of money into support consumption and to support production. But we think that this recovery is going to be slow. It's also going to point to very severe weaknesses in our economy, which really require structural reforms to lead to significant growth in the future. So we'll clearly need a vaccine before we can really exit this very deep crisis that we're going into. And so that's bad news for Europe and the US. But I think on balance, it's quite, strangely enough, I think it's quite positive news also for emerging markets in Africa. Because you think about it, we already have more than 12 trillion in negative yielding assets in the Western economies. In my balance sheet, I am already investing more than 120 billion at negative rates. So how am I going to be paying for pensions in this crazy negative yielding environment? Especially when this leads to inflation going forward, because this monetization of debt at an incredible scale in the US and Europe is going to lead to higher inflation in the future. So it will lead ultimately to depreciation of the dollar. So now you're seeing a flight to quality in the US dollar. You see quite a strong euro still. But ultimately, I think we'll see a repricing of currencies to the benefit of emerging markets. So this also leads, I think, to a great need for diversification. So the best way to protect yourself going forward is sensible diversification and exposing yourself to different sources of growth. And those sources of growth are going to be in Asia, they're going to be in Africa, the world is not going to be the same, because I think it's been mentioned several times here that supply chains will have to be completely restructured. So Europe will have to look also to Africa for supply chains, different supply chains. And I think a lot of the industrial production out of Asia will also, for a certain part, be brought over and creating opportunities in Africa. You will need new infrastructure, so it's ports, rail. This will create very good opportunities to create long-term assets with stable cash flows if the governance is right. So what I really like, the example of Ghana Infrastructure Fund, leveraging up public money by 10, creating good infrastructure investments. And I think that is a model which is extremely promising going forward. Bringing in public money, but then leveraging it up and bringing in foreign investors to support the structural reforms in the country and bring more market discipline as the economy needs to develop going forward based on a stable rule of law and stable markets and infrastructure. So I think this is a huge opportunity for Africa going forward to take advantage of let's say, the sense of urgency that a crisis like this creates.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.